When Meghan Markle arrived in Paris, she thought she was stepping back into the world of high fashion, but Dior had already closed its doors. What was supposed to be her quiet comeback turned into something far colder. The moment her team called it a private fashion trip, Dior insiders were already circulating a warning. No appointments, no fittings, no exceptions. Weeks before she landed, her name had reportedly been flagged inside the house, a discreet note reminding staff that any approach from the Duchess must go through legal. Still, Meghan showed up confident, claiming she had a scheduled couture session. But when the list was checked, her name wasn't there. No booking, no meeting, and definitely no collaboration. What she hoped would be a graceful reunion became a silent, sophisticated rejection. It didn't take long for the whispers to echo through Paris. Behind closed doors, everyone in fashion already knew Dior had quietly turned Meghan away. It wasn't headline news yet, but in couture circles, gossip spreads faster than any official statement. Those who witnessed it said the moment was eerily calm, no raised voices, no spectacle, just cold politeness. Dior's communications director approached, verified there was no booking, and courteously ended the encounter with a simple, "Have a nice day." For Meghan, the experience cut deeper than mere inconvenience. It was a quiet humiliation from the very brand she'd been courting for months. Insiders later claimed her representatives had sent Dior several polished proposals, from an ambassador role to a reimagined Diana-inspired campaign. Each pitch was sleek and grand, aiming to cast Meghan as Dior's new face of heritage and rebellion combined. But within Dior's halls, the idea fell flat. One executive reportedly remarked, "We dress icons, not controversies." Soon after, Meghan's name vanished from Dior's internal contact rosters. That courteous brush-off at the front desk wasn't spontaneous, it was merely the last step in a choice Dior had made long before she arrived. A few days later, screenshots and emails began to circulate, proof that Meghan's outreach to Dior had been happening quietly for months. Her last pitch allegedly drew a direct comparison between herself and Princess Diana, presenting her as a modern version of that timeless grace, and that, insiders say, was the breaking point. Dior's executives weren't looking for drama, they wanted distance. Privately, they decided to exclude her from any upcoming collaborations, a stance that other major fashion houses quietly mirrored soon after. But then came the unexpected twist. While Dior tried to keep everything discreet, social media suddenly erupted with praise for Meghan's supposed Dior looks. Influencers began posting identical captions and hashtags, all sounding strangely rehearsed. Dior's internal team started digging and allegedly found the posts linked to PR agencies connected to Meghan's camp. To them, it appeared like a calculated move to create a false sense of connection after being turned away. Just hours after the rejection, Dior quietly sent a short off-the-record note to editors across Europe. Dior has no ongoing or upcoming collaboration with the Duchess of Sussex. One sentence, nothing more, nothing less. The tone was composed yet absolute. In high fashion, silence doesn't mean calm, it means you've been cut off. But Dior's quiet separation wasn't the end. Inside the vast LVMH empire, the powerhouse behind Dior, Fendi, Givenchy, and Louis Vuitton, Meghan's name reportedly started appearing on an internal restricted list. These confidential rosters aren't public, yet nearly every luxury label keeps one, a collection of names seen as too risky, too unpredictable, or too much trouble to be associated with. Executives across several fashion houses reviewed their partnerships and without any public statements began stepping back too. Givenchy, the very label that once dressed her for royal occasions, was the first to quietly distance itself. Chanel soon turned down upcoming collaboration proposals. Even stylists who used to borrow samples for her were discreetly cautioned, avoid linking your work with hers. It wasn't about spite, it was self-preservation. The Duchess had turned into every fashion house's worst nightmare, a public relations risk dressed in luxury. Paris didn't banish her in headlines, it simply went silent. And in that silence, the unspoken blacklist said more than any statement ever could, yet Meghan refused to back down. Just days later, she appeared unexpectedly at Balenciaga's Paris Fashion Week show, a calculated attempt to prove she still belonged among fashion's elite. Cameras snapped, lights flared, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed like her comeback was finally here. But it wasn't. People inside the venue claimed the atmosphere changed the second she entered. The room just froze. One stylist quietly admitted. Editors stayed distant, designers greeted her with icy smiles. The applause that followed was courteous, not warm, not excited, just measured. And though the pictures screamed glamour, those present said it felt more like staged awkwardness than celebration. Not one designer came forward, and not a single stylist offered congratulations. Backstage, the whispers weren't about what she wore, they were about how far she'd slipped from fashion's inner circle. The cameras captured her smile, but Paris noticed the silence behind it. Behind the scenes at Balenciaga, soft murmurs began to circulate, the kind of whispers Paris remembers forever. Stylists and assistants exchanged hushed remarks about the Duchess, not about her style or her hair, but about something far less forgiving. One insider mentioned a strong scent lingering around her, another suggested she'd overdone her perfume, as if trying to mask something. Whether real or exaggerated didn't matter. In fashion, rumors move faster than perfume in the air. By the end of the after-party, the chatter had already escaped the venue. Within hours, employees from several brands were messaging about it. Some brushed it off as petty gossip, others claimed it revealed the uneasy energy she carried everywhere she went. The judgment wasn't about scent, it was about aura. Paris can overlook ego, it can even overlook scandal, but it never forgives when the vibe itself turns heavy, whether metaphorical or real. And that night, the air around Meghan Markle felt suffocating. Then came the act that shifted discomfort into outrage. After leaving the venue, Meghan was spotted recording near the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the very place where Princess Diana's life was tragically lost. Her team insisted it was merely a scenic route, but Parisians weren't convinced. For someone who had openly drawn comparisons to Diana before, that specific location felt far too deliberate. To many in Paris, it was a boundary that should never have been crossed. Some insiders speculated she wanted to reclaim Diana's narrative, to draw emotional parallels between their lives. But to those who still remember that loss, the act came off as tone-deaf, even unsettling. A veteran stylist who had worked with Dior put it simply, Diana's legacy belongs to remembrance, not to branding. That brief drive, filmed or not, caused more fallout than Dior's rejection ever did. In Paris, a city still mourning Diana, it felt like performance disguised as tribute. By the close of Fashion Week, the illusion had fully cracked. Those who once admired her grace now quietly questioned her motives. Balenciaga hadn't actually dressed her for the show, the outfit she wore was borrowed, not provided. The only authentic Balenciaga item she wore was a pair of plain black pumps. Everything else had been secured through go-betweens, not directly from the fashion house. To insiders, that spoke volumes: no custom tailoring, no courtesies, no personal touch. She wasn't an honored guest, she was simply there by circumstance. That was the moment Paris shifted. Editors who once praised her began to keep their distance. Stylists started turning down her requests. Even photographers stopped searching for her flattering angles. It wasn't spite, it was silent rejection. In Paris, they won't throw you out, they simply stop noticing when you walk in. When Meghan boarded her flight home, cameras still flashed, but the warmth behind them had vanished. Paris had decided the Dior episode wasn't just a one-off embarrassment. It reflected something deeper, the illusion of belonging. She had arrived in France believing couture could rebuild what controversy had taken away. Instead, she learned that fashion without sincerity is nothing more than disguise. The Duchess, who once fascinated the world, now found herself center stage in her own show, but the applause had vanished. In her pursuit to mirror Diana, she had let her own reflection fade. Paris doesn't celebrate imitation, it exposes it for what it is. A line from Le Figaro summed it up sharply. The real divide between Diana and Meghan was never about elegance, it was about honesty. By the time she departed Paris, the whispers had settled into silence, not gossip, just finality. But silence doesn't last long in Hollywood or in Meghan's world, because what came after Paris wasn't retreat, it was recalibration. While the fashion world whispered and distanced itself, Meghan began rewriting her playbook behind closed doors. Gone were the couture dreams and luxury house ambitions. Instead, she turned towards something quieter, more controllable, her own image. Insiders say that in the weeks following the Dior fallout, her team started studying brands that thrive without the blessing of Paris, lifestyle empires built on relatability, not runway status. Think quiet luxury, not couture headlines. Subtle cashmere lines, minimalist skincare, neutral palettes, the kind of soft, influencer-driven branding that feels accessible but still aspirational. Rumors even suggest a new project in the works, something positioned as a modern woman's sanctuary, blending wellness, fashion, and mindfulness. A clear attempt to distance herself from the chaos of high fashion and step into the language of lifestyle authority. Behind the scenes, PR strategists reportedly advised her to shift focus from prestige to perception. If Paris wouldn't have her, they reasoned, she'd build her own Paris online. And slowly, you could see it happening. Coordinated shoots in California vineyards, subtle name drops about sustainable fabrics, whispered partnerships with boutique designers outside the big brand ecosystem. To the casual viewer, it looked like reinvention. To insiders, it looked like retreat. Because the unspoken truth in luxury is simple. Once the major houses close their doors, every move you make outside that circle is read as exile. Still, Meghan wasn't willing to fade quietly. She leaned into the art of soft power, podcasts, interviews, and quiet image rehabilitation under the guise of authentic storytelling. Former PR associates allege she even explored creating a private brand network, independent from royal influence, hoping to prove she didn't need legacy to validate relevance. But the timing couldn't have been trickier. Every post, every product mentioned was met with scrutiny. "She's trying too hard," one industry insider told a London tabloid, but the strategy feels defensive, not visionary. And maybe that's the part the public missed. While fans saw curated photos and minimalist logos, those inside the branding world saw a desperate attempt to rebuild credibility after a silent exile. Meghan had gone from chasing couture to chasing control, from Dior's rejection to self-redirection. But in the digital age, reinvention isn't just about changing aesthetics, it's about rewriting memory. Whether her new venture succeeds or fails will depend on one thing: Paris never gave her forgiveness. What happened next didn't unfold on a runway, it happened online. When Paris went silent, Meghan's world went digital. Almost overnight, fashion blogs and influencer accounts began resurfacing her best style moments. The same captions, the same hashtags, all promoting the same narrative. Meghan wasn't excluded, she was evolving. To the untrained eye, it looked organic, even flattering. But to those watching closely, it felt too synchronized to be coincidence. PR analysts whispered that this was damage control disguised as fandom. Posts praising her quiet luxury transformation appeared across multiple accounts within hours of each other, often from agencies rumored to have previous ties to her brand advisors. The push was subtle but strategic: reshape perception before the silence hardens into rejection. Yet the internet is a double-edged mirror. The more curated the campaign became, the more critics sensed orchestration. Comment sections that once adored her began dissecting every image. "Why is everyone posting the same thing?" one follower wrote. "It feels staged." And once that seed of doubt was planted, it spread faster than the original praise. Hashtags meant to uplift her started trending for the wrong reasons. Style commentators questioned the authenticity of the supposed comeback, calling it self-made hype. Even entertainment outlets began publishing pieces on the Meghan algorithm, a phrase coined to describe how her online presence suddenly felt automated, more managed than natural. Behind the scenes, her media team reportedly panicked. They designed a narrative of reinvention, but the audience saw manipulation. So the tone shifted again: less glamour, more humanity. Suddenly, interviews focused on vulnerability, growth, and resilience. Longtime followers noticed the rebrand in real time. Gone were the glossy campaign photos. In their place appeared backyard shots, cozy sweaters, books, coffee tables, dogs. It was calculated relatability. Rumor has it, a Los Angeles-based PR firm specializing in digital empathy marketing was quietly hired to humanize her image, teaching her team how to make imperfection look intentional. But once you lose control of the narrative, even sincerity looks rehearsed. Every candid smile became evidence of strategy, every silence a PR pause. Industry insiders said the irony was brutal. The harder she tried to prove authenticity, the more artificial it appeared. Some fashion executives began joking privately that Meghan had entered her algorithm era, a phase where brand management replaced personality. Yet beneath the ridicule, there was also fascination, because while Paris rejected her, the internet couldn't stop watching. Whether she was adored, criticized, or endlessly debated, Meghan's name still dominated digital spaces. In the attention economy, that's its own form of power, and she knew it. Her team didn't need couture approval anymore. They had engagement. And in a world that rewards visibility over validation, clicks might just be the only crown left to claim. By the time the online noise started to fade, something new was already forming behind the scenes. Meghan wasn't just reacting anymore, she was regrouping. Rumors from industry insiders suggested a quiet but deliberate pivot. Instead of fighting her way back into couture's closed doors, she was building her own entrance. The word brand independence started floating through entertainment circles. Not another royal venture, not another podcast, something bigger, something that put her in control of her own narrative. Those close to her hinted that she'd been taking meetings with small, emerging designers, names without legacy baggage, hungry for exposure and willing to collaborate under her terms. It wasn't Dior or Balenciaga money, but it was creative freedom. In the luxury world, that move read as both brave and desperate. Starting your own label after rejection from the major houses is like launching your own kingdom after exile. Impressive if it succeeds, embarrassing if it doesn't. But Meghan has always played the long game. Analysts believe she's positioning herself to own the entire pipeline, from storytelling to production, from lifestyle to influence. If the houses won't dress her, she'll become one. The concept aligns perfectly with the new cultural wave of quiet ownership, where celebrities turn rejection into reinvention. Her fans see resilience, critics see reinvention fatigue. Still, one undeniable truth remains: Meghan knows how to command attention. Whether through scandal, style, or strategy, she's never invisible for long. But this next phase might test something deeper than visibility: credibility. Because while clicks can build relevance, they can't build legacy. Insiders speculate that she's eyeing collaborations with sustainable designers and possibly exploring an eco-conscious line inspired by freedom and modern femininity. But there's risk in every comeback. If this new chapter feels forced or opportunistic, the same industry she's trying to impress could finish what Dior started: permanent exclusion. For now, Meghan walks a fine line between reinvention and retreat. To the public, she's curating a calm, empowered image. To those in fashion, she's still the woman Paris quietly turned away. Whether this pivot restores her influence or cements her exile depends on one thing: not who she partners with next, but whether the world still believes the performance. Paris may have closed its doors, but the story didn't end at the airport. Because with Meghan, it never really ends, it just changes stages. The Dior rejection, the Balenciaga chill, the whispers, the backlash, they all became part of the same performance she's now trying to rewrite. Her image has always been her currency, and even when the market turns cold, she knows how to keep it in circulation. That's the paradox of Meghan Markle. She doesn't disappear when rejected, she adapts, reshapes, rebrands. And in an era where narrative is more valuable than truth, adaptation is survival. Those who once called her controversial now study her as a case of digital resilience. Each stumble becomes content, each silence becomes speculation. Some call it persistence, others call it PR genius. But in the echo chamber of modern fame, both are the same thing. Meghan has learned that you don't have to be invited to the table if you can build your own, and invite the cameras instead. She's rewriting what it means to be excluded from elite circles by making exclusion itself part of the brand story. Still, one question lingers: how long can the performance last before the audience moves on? Because power built on perception demands constant upkeep, and reinvention comes with an expiration date. The more she tries to define herself, the more the world defines her instead. Paris gave her silence and she turned it into spectacle. The rejection became relevance. The distance became dialogue. And maybe that's her greatest strength, turning every closed door into another headline. For Meghan Markle, the show doesn't stop when the lights dim. It simply finds a new stage. And as long as people keep watching, the performance continues. Elegant, defiant, and unending.